What is going on, Diesel Nation? We're excited to have you guys with us today on the Diesel Podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube and aren't subscribed, make sure and click the subscribe button, like, comment, let us know what you think about the episode. If there's a particular guest or topic that you'd like to have on, we're always checking your feedback on there and love to be able to take those suggestions and then get them onto future episodes. Before we get to today's podcast, I wanted to give a shout out to a couple of our sponsors that help make the Diesel Podcast popular. The first is Target Sports USA. So if you're into the outdoors, hunting, taking road trips, going to the range, they're a great company. I've actually been a customer of theirs from way before the podcast even started, and they have some really cool benefits. So they have a special link for us. You're going to find it down below, or you can go to targetsportsusa.com/dieselpc, and you're going to get a free cleaning kit on your first order by going to that page. So it's a great way to get some cool maintenance items that you're going to need for your toys, and they have a ton of different choices, whether you're going to be hunting or going to the range. There's incredible ways to check inventory, be able to see what's in stock, different brands, different options. They also have something that's really cool, which is a membership. Now, the membership is something where you get free shipping on every order. So whether you want one box or you're getting 50 boxes, no matter what it is, you get free shipping on it, plus an 8% discount automatically. And there's different times during the year where that discount can go up to 16%. So it always helps to save a little money, get some really cool gear we need for our hobbies out there. Part of being a member is you also automatically get entered into two giveaways. One is an all-expense paid hunting trip to Colorado. So that includes airfare, meals, everything that you're going to need. It's 6 days long. It's really cool. So I know a lot of our listeners are going to be interested in that. You guys really love the outdoors. So you're automatically entered for that. Plus, they do a truck giveaway every year. So it's a Ford F-150 that they give away to members. And I think the last one, he was a member for 7 months and got it. So if you're existing, new, you join up. Great way to be able to save some money, get some free shipping, and get entered into two really cool giveaways. Also, Kershaw Knives, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the outdoors and hunting, fishing, EDC, things like that. But Kershaw Knives has a 40% off MSRP code just for you guys. If you use code 2024diesel40, you get 40% off MSRP. Just go to kershaw.kaiusa.com and use that code. They have a bunch of choices for different opening mechanisms, blade steel, blade shapes, handle materials, and a whole lineup of knives that are designed to meet any budget. So if you're in the market, definitely head on over to their website, use that code, and get 40% off MSRP. All right, let's get to today's podcast. Kat, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. Look forward to chatting with you today and learning more about Siskiyou Diesel. And there's a lot of great videos you guys are putting out, which is where a lot of the questions we get on the podcast pertain to the things you guys are covering. So I thought it'd be great to be able to sit down, chat with you today, learn more about the company, yourself, and then some of the issues that people who own newer diesel trucks are facing. So welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I always like to start with a little bit of background, like on yourself, your company. How did you get into diesel, into the industry? Was it something you always wanted to work in? Was it something you kind of fell into? Like me, I just fell into diesel. I didn't plan on it or anything like that. It just kind of happened.
So kind of fell into it. My dad was an aerospace machinist, so I had always really geared more towards that aspect of things with some like the AutoCAD and some CNC stuff. And then I met my husband, which is my business partner and my ex-husband now. But he's still very much part of the business. He owns majority of it, but him and I started Siskiyou Diesel back in 2007 in California. So that was primarily was his goal, and his drive was the diesel side of things. And then I mean, obviously being his wife, I fell into it with him, and just kind of helped him on that side of things, just bookkeeping, for a while there. We had a couple diesel pages that were up. It's been a while now, but there was one called Ladies of Diesel that was out a while ago. That was me originally. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. I got on the cover of Diesel World magazine, their first Girls Gone Diesel issue. And then from there, it just snowballed and just kind of took off from there, and then started competing in drag racing, sled pulling, and Matt did as well. Matt did more of like the 10-second index to 9-second index, and I primarily stayed in like the super diesel class, doing like the 770 classes. We both have stepped back quite a bit as we moved our company from California to Oregon. And then, obviously had kids, had the family thing. But that's kind of how we initially started. He got me into it. I'm still in it. Matt also owns a couple other businesses, some UTV companies. And so Matt has me run the diesel shop for him. So primarily I manage the shop with our crew of guys and do a lot of some of the tech support stuff as far as the emission side of things go, and do some of the service writing.
It's really interesting you mentioned that, because my background was more on the sales side originally, which
Mhm.
was something I was in a completely different industry, and I thought, I'm really passionate about trucks. How can I get into it? And there was a service department that was there. And to me, it's just where the magic happened. Like, I didn't have anything to do with fixing anything, diagnosing
Yeah,
anything,
no.
none of it. I just knew to get the parts, work with the truck owner and stuff. And that side's always fascinated me. And I think that's what really stood out about the videos that you guys have been doing on social media. Was there's a lot of issues that newer truck owners face first, like say in 2007 when you got into it, or when I got into it later. They're totally
Mhm.
different. And
Oh, absolutely.
what has that evolution been like for you guys? Because I think there's a lot of pressure on diesel shops, diesel companies, even truck owners that have newer trucks. What kind of products are out there, how they stay compliant. We've had a lot of companies on talking about EO numbers and SEMA testing and carb testing and all that. So it's a different landscape. But what's that been like from your perspective?
So on our end of things, obviously with doing a lot of the work that we did, so primarily we were like an 80-20 as far as like 80% performance to 20% repair. That is completely flip-flopped in the last 10 years. We're now 80% repair, 20% performance. And the biggest thing that we notice is the largest struggle is the lack of education and information that's available to the customer, as far as the way these new trucks need to be driven and handled. So you have a individual that, let's say he's had a construction company, or what's really popular around here is reforestation companies for individuals that it's like, oh, well, I bought my first Cummins in 89. And I'm like, well, sir, that VE pump, okay, and your 180 horsepower on a good day, it's significantly different than what we have to deal with today, like on how to drive them. And I think that sometimes for me, that's my personal struggle. I've got a gentleman in here that could be old enough to be my dad, and I'm trying to tell him on how he has to drive his truck. And sometimes it doesn't go over very well. But I find that our biggest issue is the lack of education as far as customers are concerned. The customer's not necessarily paying attention to a lot of the stuff that's changing as far as diesel goes today and the type of diesel that we have. Or you have gentlemen that have a mid 2000s truck or an early 2000s truck, and they don't understand why they're struggling so much with their emission system now than they did before, but they don't pay attention to how our diesel has changed. So your L5P Duramax, wasn't really running on this type of diesel, this low sulfur or the higher biodiesel content that's in it. The flash point of it, when you have guys that are just going to the cheapest diesel in town, which is going to be a B20 or greater, and they don't understand why the truck's having a hard time starting, why it's underpowered, why all of a sudden his turbo vanes are sticking, why his EGR valve isn't functioning appropriately. And just having to explain to him, like, hey, dude, the flash point of a B20 diesel is over 230 degrees. The flash point of your B5 is only around 120. But you get into the B20 diesel, and on average, when we send diesel in for testing back east to Blackstone Laboratories, the B20 blended diesel has a 6% or higher water inside of it. And it's just knocking these trucks out left and right.
That's a really good point, and something I found is overlooked a lot. And there's been some conversations I've had with like Hotshot Secrets and Amsoil and other companies where they're talking about that stuff. And I find a lot of the same feedback you mentioned when a listener messages in or somebody comments on YouTube and they're saying, hey, you know, I had my second gen Cummins and it ran for 400,000 miles and was great. But here, my 6.7 Cummins is having this issue, or same thing with the Duramax or Powerstroke, any of them.
Mhm.
What would you say if you could give advice to somebody as far as how to operate their newer truck? What are a couple things that are really important for them to learn or pay attention to versus how they did on their third gen or second gen or LV7 or 7.3 Powerstroke?
So the biggest thing with a lot of the customers is asking the appropriate questions and trying to get more information out of them. For example, one of our customers, so where we're at in town here, it's a valley area. The population is around 200,000. So, but a lot of people live in town here, even on the freeways. It's only 55. In town, it's 45. And so this individual lives at point A and he has to go to work at point B, which is only 10 miles away. So right off the bat, I know he's probably not letting his truck warm up enough, so it's not getting up to temperature. In order for a lot of these emission systems to operate properly, they need to see higher RPMs. They have to have appropriate conditions, such as the coolant temp being up to operating temp, the oil temp being up to operating temp. Obviously your NOx sensors working appropriately and EGT sensors. And in his drive, he is not meeting any of those requirements. So having to talk to customers about how to drive their truck appropriately would be in a situation where they would have to be driving their truck in like manual shifting mode. Trying to keep them in the higher RPM ranges, between 1,700 and 2,000 RPMs, running a diesel additive, something that has a cetane booster in there to help that diesel burn a little bit more efficiently. But that's really the biggest thing that we could do, is having to advise people on how to drive it, just getting the right information out of them for their driving conditions and how they use their truck. It's kind of that, than around our area where we're at. When you look up like the top 5 steepest grades in North America, 3 of them are within 50 miles of this shop.
I think it's one of the hardest parts to transition from, depending when you got your first diesel truck. Like what appealed to me when I first got into them was I could idle this thing forever. Didn't matter what speed I went. I could just do pretty much whatever I wanted with it. And then I got right into the emission stuff. And I had a truck that had some of those early kind of teething issues with it. And it's a constant theme that I hear from truck owners. And I think because we do a podcast, we have lots of conversations. People find us on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, and they're either really new to diesel or they don't even own one yet. And the most popular question we get is, what's the best one to buy? Which I don't have personal experience with an L5P or a 2023 or 2024 6.7 Powerstroke or something like that. So I thought it would be great to chat with you and go through each brand as far as what are some common issues and then fixes for them. So I think we start with the 6.7 Cummins, the newer ones. What are some common issues that you guys see in the shop and then fixes for them?
So common problems that we're having today, probably the biggest gripe that people have on like a 4th gens and the 5th gens is going to be oil leaks. I have had to do more reseals on 6.7 Cummins than I ever have on a 12 valve. I got a 12 valve in the shop that's not leaking an inch. And then I've got a 6.7 Cummins in here in 2018 that we're doing a front main seal on, and you can see the front timing housing cover on the inside where their gasket is starting to blow internally. And you look at the bolts and they're finger tight.
Wow.
Their intake manifolds, the grid heater bolt that comes apart, you're lucky if it melts. We had to do 6 engines in the last couple of years because they were unlucky. It did not melt. And the bolt broke off and went into an open exhaust valve and took out a piston, took out the head. The turbos, they're still not very great. I got my fingers crossed. Canon has got a new design on the VGT turbo on how to make it better. And it would take it more towards the hydraulic driven ones, like the Garrett ones for the Duramax and the 6.0s, where they have their actuator. You got your turbo vane position sensor, then you have your actuator. So Clint Cannon from ATS has got a design that is still in testing that is going to make it more towards a hydraulic one. So hopefully we will have a better fix for that. If not, Fleece has a very nice turbo that we religiously sell. We either do the BD Screamer, or we'll do a Fleece Cheetah, or we'll get into industrial injections, XRs. Those are kind of our go-to, and it just has to do with the customer's preference.
With the leaks, where do you think it's coming from? Is it a quality issue, a build issue?
It is a quality control, because when those front timing housing, the housings, so not the cover, but the housing, the bolts are loose. Like, they're backed off. We've had a couple water pumps that were practically falling off on 2018s. Yeah, I don't know what happened in manufacturing between 16 and 18s, but those have probably been the most that we've done complete reseals on, where, we're pulling the engines, we're stripping them to a short block and just doing everything. Front timing, housing covers, wrench and adapter plates, oil pans, head gasket, and just kind of resealing everything.
The follow-up question I'll get from listeners right after I direct them towards an episode, or sometimes I can answer the question, is they'll say, well, how much does it cost to fix that? What is somebody looking at ballpark for that?
A complete reseal, and this is based off of the following products that I will do my very best to twist your arm to do. And if you don't do them, I'm going to call you a bunch of dirty words. But it's ranging about 13,000. So 13,000, what that is getting you is, we're pulling your engine, we're taking it to a short block and completely resealing it. I am doing a different damper. I feel like they're severely underrated dampers. And I think that every engine should have an ATI or a fluid damper or something. They will significantly help extend out the life of your bottom end by taking down the torsion vibrations. We like to do a bulletproof diesel water pump, all the billet aluminum ones. Cummins, fun fact, the 89 water pump works up to 18. In fact, I think it actually works up to 21. But they used to be metal, and then they went away from the metal, and they're all that composite plastic now. So before, it was just a 6.7, because there was a totally different part number for it. They're no longer that. So you've got like 80. So it's one part number from Cummins for 89 to, they only listed at 18, but it's that plastic. So we do the bulletproof diesel water pump. We do a upgraded manifold. I give you your option of speed, ATS, AFE, or BD. Those are the only options I'm willing to offer, because those are the ones we know that work. I'm not going to put something on your truck that I'm not going to put on mine. That does include 625 ARP head studs. This is a hill I will die on. I will not put in 425s on a 6.7 Cummins. You will blow through them, and you're about to be real mad. We do the 103-pound valve springs, obviously, just because everybody knows that the stock valve springs are only going to control your valve train up to, I think, max 45 pounds of boost or drive pressure. Anything over that, you're going to get valve float. And obviously, if you do a Fleece Cheetah or greater, you're already meeting that max. And then that also includes doing a Banks intake manifold and grid heater.
And that's to avoid the bolt issue that you mentioned before, right?
That's to avoid the bolt issue. That's doing a fleece coolant bypass kit to help keep that number 6 cylinder as cool as we possibly can, especially for any emissions intact 6.7 Cummins. Those things get hot, offensively hot. Obviously, that bolt's melting on that intake heater. So a lot of people do not realize, I'm like, dude, this is a serious heat issue. So we want to keep everything as cool as we possibly can.
Wanted to transition over a bit, because I think there's so many different questions we get from each kind of camp, like Cummins, Duramax, Powerstroke. I'm most familiar with the 6.7 Cummins because I had one. It was made before that year range, but I did have a rear main seal leak, and I only had like 30,000 miles on it. So I'm kind of a little bit familiar with that a little bit, but I want to learn more about the other two because I haven't owned them. So say on like L5Ps or LMLs, I know they're different engines, and they're probably going to have a little bit different issues, but what are some of the common things you're seeing in the shop on those two?
Start with the L5P, so the 17 to current issues that we're seeing in the early L5P are going to be exhaust manifolds that are warping, or their studs, because they went away from a bolt style and they went to a stud and nut for the exhaust manifolds, similar to the 6.7 Fords. So we are seeing a lot of warped manifolds before like 60,000 miles. We're seeing broken studs. We're seeing that the actuator arm, anybody that has an L5P, if you go out and look at your truck and you look at that actuator arm that's on the back side of the compressor housing, it has a bushing that goes into the back of it there, and they are leaking. Currently, with Garrett, that is a non-serviceable item. That is a non-replaceable part. I mean, eventually I'm hoping they're gonna, release something that allows us to service that item. Hoping with the the Right to Repair Act, that some of that stuff will be covered. But those are leaking, which obviously is going to cause that turbo to not build the right amount of drive pressure or boost, and is going to lead to turbo stiction issues. And then obviously the famous electrical problems that we have with the L5Ps. Fleece, I have an entire wall of fleece connectors, and they are all dedicated to the L5P Duramax. Between the injector harnesses to currently, we're starting to see a lot more of the fuel pressure regulator sensor that is in the front of the passenger side of the fuel rail on the Duramax. Those things, the sensors go out primarily just because of normal wear and tear that's in the fuel system. But that harness itself gets super hot. Like, I'm not quite sure why, but we have a lot of those harnesses where they're just crispy. You got to take it off and the wires is literally snapping.
Wow.
So that's the biggest issue that we're seeing with L5Ps is their electrical harnesses. I don't know if it's, the engine makes a lot of heat. The engine bay does. But that harness is towards the front of the motor. But that's been a lot of big problems. There's been electrical issues with the L5Ps.
On the electrical side, from the truck owner's perspective, what would they notice? Because when I think of electrical issues, I just think of a nightmare, because you might not know exactly why it's doing something, why you have this check engine light on, why you have this erratic behavior. What are they going to notice when they start to have electrical issues?
So in the event that they're having the injector harness issues or the fuel rail sensor issue, the truck will actually put you into a reduced power mode. And it's almost like, if you're familiar with any of the LOYs, wherein they had the injector 2 and injector 7 harness issue, the truck almost run like a tractor because it starts shutting down a couple of these cylinders. And on it, it will actually say, please service the emission system, which is the biggest misconception. This is a fuel issue, not an emission system issue. So whenever we have people call that schedule appointments, like, hey, my truck's running rough and I have something wrong with my emission system, we already know that that's not the case. We're going to book them for our electrical technician for the fuel system issue, just because, okay, you never had any other issues. Did you just get diesel somewhere? They're like, no. Okay, perfect. This is most likely not going to be anything having to do with fuel contamination. This is strictly going to have to do with your electrical system.
With the LML, whenever I think of the LML, I think of the CP4. But that might just be because it's really popular and I might be missing some other things. But is the CP4 the main issue with the LML, or do they also have maybe some electrical issues or
the LMLs, the 11s, 12s, and 13s had electrical issues. There were 4 different engine harness changes in those years. So, which gets to be a big pain in the butt. When you have a issue with that harness and you call GM, even though you've got the VIN number, you got the manufacture date, you pull the VIN attributes, they still cannot tell me what harness is in that truck. We have to go through the motions of physically removing that harness first, pulling off the engineering number off the tag that's on there, and you pray that that tag is still there. If it is not, you are ordering multiple harnesses. And in most cases, a few of the differences are going to be with the harness length that goes to the engine oil pressure sensor. I believe that's one of the biggest differing factor on which one it is. And most people, they're like, oh, it's not too much of a difference. I'm like, it is when you order the wrong one, and now you got to extend the harness 6 inches. It's kind of a problem. It's a pain in the butt. And then obviously the CP4 issue is, it is a big issue. And a lot of people's biggest question is, it's like, well, okay, well, Ford has a CP4 too. Granted, Fords, they do have failures, but they're not as common as a Duramax. And the biggest obvious issue that we can see between the two of those is going to be the fact that the Duramax doesn't have a lift pump. It doesn't have any, primary support to help get the fuel up there. The pump is having to do all the work itself. That and then the AC Delco fuel filter only filters down to 6 microns, and there's only one. The Fords, it's the same thing. It's about a 4 to 6 micron, but obviously they have two, and they have a lift pump, which is why the LML is going to be a little bit more common to have a fuel problem and fuel failure. And unfortunately, there's not really, nobody's made like S&S as the fuel disaster bypass kit for the Fords. Nobody really has that for the Duramaxes. The only one that made something remotely comparable to that would just be Exergy have their upgraded FCA. But inadvertently, you could cause an injection pump failure by doing that upgraded FCA, because those FCAs have magnets in them. And if that pump is already starting to come apart, and then you go and pull that stock FCA out, there's a good chance you're dropping metal inside there that it was just holding on to.
I had a
So
listener.
a lot of the,
I was just going to say, I had a listener send me a message, and he wanted a whole episode about the difference between like doing a disaster prevention kit, and he had an LML, and doing a CP3 swap. And I had another podcast, I was talking with a company, and we kind of touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to ask you, because what he had told me on it was, hey, the disaster prevention kit might work, but you're still going to need a pump if the CP4 fails. So do you approach it saying, I want to eliminate the whole issue before it even starts? Or I have an issue with my CP4, the disaster prevention kit saves my fuel system, but I'm still going to need a tow, and I'm still going to have to buy a CP4. So when a truck's brought into the shop, an LML, and somebody has a, let's say not a failure, but they're worried about it, or maybe they do have a failure, is your preference to go to one of the CP3 kits that are on the market to be able to solve the issue once and for all?
Yeah, we give our customers the option, because typically we see that the CP4s are about roughly 100,000-mile injection pump without having any primary support beforehand. So we do inform customers, so they do have CP3 conversion kits that are supposed to be no tuning required. 90% of the kits we do have to eventually tune the truck. They do struggle. We primarily see in this area with areas with people that have, I guess, flat ground. They don't have grades. They don't have higher elevations to get over. I mean, over here with like where our shop's at, we're at 1,400 feet. But you go to leave this valley, you're going to be hitting upwards to 4,000 feet in elevation just to get out of here. And we find that these trucks struggle quite a bit on some of them fairly violently when they're towing. The surging that we get, it's a problem. So we do inform customers like, hey, I'm more than happy to do a CP3 conversion for you, but I do need you to understand that you may have to have your truck tuned to have that surging, that fuel arc, that fuel spike corrected. And sometimes and that in itself will deter certain customers, because they don't want their truck tuned. They don't want to deal with that. And at that point, then we say, okay, well, then your only other option is a new CP4 paired with a lift pump. Your AirDog or Fast, your choice. I'm going to push more towards Fast. We've been selling that fairly religiously. And, personally, I love Brad. I really do like him. He's a very nice man. I like that company.
That's a really good insight, because I've never really talked much about how seamless the kits can be. And here in a second, we're going to get to 6M Powerstrokes and the DCR pump and other stuff, but just how seamless, because I have seen no tuning required, but then a few people say, hey, I still needed to do something after this. So I think that's really good advice for somebody to be prepared. If they go that route, they still might need to do something extra.
And if that's not an option for them, like if they mean like, no, that's not an option. Okay, well then now the CP3 is no longer an option for you, because I'm not about to have you mad, because that's a easy, almost a $4,000 bill. The kits, the fleece kit is our go-to CP3 conversion. They're $1,900. Emissions compliant trucks, you've got 15 to 16 hours in labor. And you've got roughly $150 to $170 in gaskets that you need. And then obviously doing a fuel filter change. We highly encourage other services at that time. We're going to be in there, the air filter, elect. And then obviously having to run a forced regen after the fact to make sure that everything in that system goes through its self-check. Because once you unplug or disconnect anything inside your emission system, which obviously you've got to pull the EGR cooler, you got to pull that valve, that system has to go through a self-check. So once the work is done, we also have to put on like 30 miles onto that truck to make sure that everything is actually working appropriately. So you're not just having to deal with doing a CP3 conversion, you're also having to reset the emissions data because you unplugged everything.
Okay. These are all details that I think sometimes a truck owner, they're not accustomed to it, or they don't know all that has to go into replacing
doing the swap.
Yeah.
Right. You're not just replacing a pump. That's other stuff is involved. Obviously it's a good idea to clean some of the stuff in that system. Or let's say we pull your pump and we're trying to do this proactively. When we pull your pump, I tell my technicians, pull that FCA out. I want to see what's in there. If there's any kind of metal, we need to set appropriate expectations and be like, hey, bud, real sorry. You kind of caught this, but ideally we should do a fuel system flush and treat it almost like a misfuel treatment and strip the tank, blow out the lines, and treat it, because there is at that point some contamination in that system. And you have people that are like, why? I've changed my filters. I've done this, I've done that. I'm like, there's no filter between your fuel rails and your injection pump. And then they're like, oh, okay, well, I want to put one in. No, sir, this is a 30,000 PSI system. They do not make one. But the most that I can do is do a misfuel treatment and try to clean your system as well as we can, and put in a fuel additive, and just know that you're probably going to have to do something about your injectors. And it's something you're going to really need to keep an eye on, because the telltale signs of your truck starting to have injector issues, unfortunately, you can't see because of the DPF and the CAT. It's filtering out the excessive smoke that you would normally see, like the white smoke, the black smoke. We just have to tell people, at the higher part of RPMs, like when you're towing, you need to listen to a rattle. If it's starting to get louder, that's your injectors. Do not disregard that for it being valve lash. Your truck only has 150,000 miles. You don't have valve lash right now. When you hear that noise, please don't ignore it. You may have a serious issue.
It kind of seems like with the LMLs, if I was going to buy one, I would just need to be prepared to do something with the injection pump. That's my perception of it. It's almost a given. I'm either going to need a new CP4, I'm going to need to do a CP3 conversion at some point, depending on the mileage.
It's one of those things, like when we do a lot of pre-purchase inspections for customers, that's how we treat them, is similar to if you're looking at a 6L. A 6L comes in. It has stock bolts. It's, you're looking at the oil cooler top housing, looking to see if there's an insignia for any kind of branding on it. You're looking at the EGR cooler, looking to see, again, if there's any insignia branding on it, whether, like, if it's a Dorman cooler, it's got its stamp on it. If it's Bulletproof Diesel, it's got their stamp on it. But it's the same thing. Like when a LML comes in, whether it's got under 100,000 miles or over, we are looking to see if that pump looks like it's ever been out. We're looking to see, we'll usually factor in a fuel filter change on a inspection and cut the fuel filter apart and start looking. Or we'll let them make the choice, if they want to spend a little bit more time, allow us to pull the fuel rail pressure sensor off the driver's side rail and look to see if there's any metal on it. Or we'll put a borescope inside that rail and look.
Okay.
But it's one of those things, if you're buying it and it's used, obviously it's used, they don't make the LMLs anymore. It's one of those things that, you either need to plan on doing a CP3 conversion, or if we find metal, we tell people, hey, start setting your money aside for the disaster kit, and that depending on the branding of products that you want to do and the route that you want to go in, when that pump actually goes and does damage, it's an easy $13,000 repair. Easy, between labor and parts.
I think that's the scary thing with the newer trucks, and we're going to get to the Powerstroke next, but it's the cost of repairs that can be so much, because we're talking about injectors, we're talking about a lot of labor, we're talking about maybe damage to other components. It gets very expensive. So I think it's worthwhile on the education side for truck owners to want to learn as much as they can, be able to find a shop, that they trust, and be able to be proactive with it to avoid not just the cost, but can you guys even get the parts right now? Is it available?
Yes.
What's the lead time on it? Those sorts of things.
Exactly.
I don't want to forget about the Powerstroke guys. And I know there's a major break between like 11 to 14s and then 15 plus and different model years. But what are the issues you're seeing in the shop on them?
So with the 11 to 14s, we do see a lot of bottom end failures with flattened cams and lifters. I think it was a manufactured defect that they had, as well as valves. Some of them are dropping valves. So whenever we get in any of the 11 to 14s, and if it's the first time I'm seeing a truck, this specific truck of this customer's, we always like to do a wellness check. So generally for our shop, do we take in like random customers for oil changes? Like if I've never seen you before, not particularly. But when we have a truck that does come in for that, we will kind of go over the general stuff. We're going to be looking for any kind of metal in the fuel system. We are going to be looking at, obviously, the upper boost tube from the intake manifold to the air to water cooler to see if it's cracked. You're going to be looking at a lot of the vacuum lines. That's the other thing too, is that with those turbos, with the early ones, they're all vacuum air actuated on those ones. And so we do find that there is a lot of them where the hoses are cracked, they're bleeding, they're just not sealed very well. The 15s, 16s, and 17s, they did do some updates, obviously, to that turbo, but some of them had some issues. A lot of the same problems. I think the least amount of issues that I see for Fords, like the 18 and newer, have been awesome. If you asked me this 17 years ago, I'd be kicking myself in the butt. I would never say, but now I'm like, yeah, that's the best truck on the market today. I don't see them for problems other than the boost tube and the CP4, but even their CP4 issues, we have outstanding fixes for them. The DCR pump, love it. Love it, love it, love it. I cannot speak highly enough about it. No tuning required. So it's not like with the Duramaxes with the CP3 conversions for the LMLs where, hey, you may have to do tuning. I haven't had to do any. Complete drop-in. No power loss, no surging, no check engine codes, nothing.
It's really interesting because sometimes I take some heat for what brands of engine we'll talk about or what people say, because there's each owner is very, I think, brand loyal. And even myself, like when I came into it, it was Cummins. That's what I owned. That's what I got into. And I think back to that time, and if somebody had a 6-liter when they were new, you'd think, why'd you buy a 6-liter? Why didn't you go buy a 5.9 common rail? Or why didn't you buy an LBC?
The 6-liters are pretty tough.
They are.
They have like one of the strongest bottom ends on the market. And I think that's just severely underrated. Obviously, their heads are a problem, but it's a really strong motor.
I think that's where the market has changed so much, because at that time, they were just thought of as horrible. They weren't reliable. You couldn't do anything with them. LB7s, you'd bend rods, LLYs with the head issues, cracking pistons on LBZs. And then it was just all these different things where I look at 2024 and I look back, there's so much that's happened in the aftermarket to make them reliable. But the question I get the most is, what's the best new truck? And I don't know because I haven't owned it, but I always like to ask that question of people and companies who work on these every day. And what you mentioned, I hear the most, is a 6.7 Powerstroke as far as reliability, not just with the engine, but also the transmission and other components.
Yeah.
It's very...
I've only had to replace 3 6Rs. Only 3.
That's it's just crazy how the markets change so much from the early days till now. And the DCR pump is another one where we had SNS on maybe a year ago, and that is such just a complete fix and something that's so awesome in the aftermarket to be able to take a pump, swap it, no tuning.
Literally, I have to do nothing.
Yeah, it's just
complete drop-in.
Very interesting. I thought of a question to ask you a little bit ago, but I wanted to wait till we kind of went through the different engines. You'd mentioned sending off fuel to, I believe it was Blackstone Industries to be tested.
Yep.
I wanted to ask you about the oil side of it, if that's something you guys do, because I'm thinking, if I was near you guys, I had you guys service my truck all the time, and I said, hey, I want to have an oil analysis done. Is something going on with my engine? How valuable is that for somebody they have a truck, they want to keep it, but they want to know what's going on internally that you may not see or hear or feel, but they just want to know, hey, am I having some wear in the engine or what's going on? Is that something you guys incorporate into like a service package?
Yeah, especially it's something that we would advise on anything that's over like 200,000 miles. Especially with somebody on a mid 2000s truck is primarily where we're going to push pretty hard on it, is because again, oil as well as diesel has changed so much that everybody's like, oh, I've been running the same diesel for 20 years. I'm like, this ain't the same diesel. No, sir, this is not the same oil. The federal government says so. Just the additives that are used in it and how it's refined, it changes every single year. So we do that. I carry sample kits here. I can send off diesel, which I do very commonly, especially when we have a unusual fuel failure. So like if we have a fuel issue, I religiously use dynamite diesel for all of our fuel testing as well as our fuel components if I'm buying anything fuel wise. And as long as Lenny offers it, I'm buying it. That's the direction that we're going. It is a hill I will die on. I do not care. You cannot tell me differently. But we will send in for fuel testing when the guys at DDP get back to me and say, hey, we found something super abnormal. Can you guys go and send in for some testing? And we'll get that done. Same thing with the oil, especially if we were just into an engine and now we're having a problem. Like as of recently, we had a 2010 Cummins that we did a head gasket job on, 500 miles down the road, truck starts knocking. So immediately I assume something happened with the bridge. Something happened with a rocker arm. It slipped. Something happened with, a valve adjustment, something. So we have the truck come in and immediately, we start the truck, check engine codes, no check engine codes. But yeah, it is like knocking, almost like a miss, like it has a dead hole. Pull the valve cover, take a look, watch the valve train run, don't see a problem. Everything's intact, rocker arms where it's supposed to be, push rods, bridges. Run valves, check them, make sure they're within like the 10,000 to the 20,000 intake and valve. Everything is golden. We're like, oh, there's a problem. Open up the oil filter, cut it apart, tons of metal. So we're like, all right, we got a problem. So send off an oil analysis. And now I'm assuming if this has anything to do with the head gasket job that we had just done, I would see excessive iron. Because obviously you did a valve adjustment, was something done inappropriately or wrong to where it started eating through the tappets or the cam or the crank. I get my oil analysis back and it's offensively high on aluminum. So pistons are coming apart or something happened and it got too damn hot. I don't know. And it caused a piston to either swell and grab a sleeve, or if it started getting on some of the Cummins engines in cylinder one, they get a shelf in the bottom of that first cylinder and it just starts really wearing at it. But that points us in the right direction, especially for a customer if you're keeping a truck. So, you have a truck, you want an oil change done on it. We send in an analysis and the tint's super high. That's the coating on your bearings. It's high on boron. That's what your bearings are made out of. Anything high on iron, that's your block, that's your crank, that's your cam. Aluminum, it's going to be your pistons. But with these companies that you can send them into, they will give you your average and they will give you the nation average of a similar vehicle with similar mileage and based off the oil that you're running, whether it's AMSOIL, Schaefer's, Valvoline Blue, Dello, Rotella, whatever. And they can compare it to what it should be. But it helps give a customer a good idea of what's going on with their bottom end and what they could look forward to in the future to potential repairs or potential costs that they're going to be incurring shortly.
That's really interesting. I think that would definitely be something that I would do just regularly or whenever you guys have recommended it, to just be able to know what's going on. I thought of one last question for you. I didn't want to forget about that group of listeners and enthusiasts we have where they're like, I don't want anything new. I want an older truck. I want something pre-2007. Would you say that the biggest thing they can do to help their truck is to address the fuel quality and the oil they use because of the changes that have happened with national standards, type of oil, type of fuel from 2003 to 2024? They're so different. Is that the biggest challenge that they have?
Yeah. And across the board, obviously the newer trucks aren't going to have as much of a problem like the newer trucks. Because ideally you are dealing with the type of diesel that we have out today with injector sizes. Your combustion chamber on your piston, just the way that it's shaped and designed around a certain combustion point, a certain temperature. So we push pretty hard on lift pumps across the board on everything to try to filter out. I mean, like fast fuel systems, they filter out 99.9% of the water. They filter down to 2 microns. Plus they take all the air out of the fuel system, because the next worst thing for a diesel fuel system other than water and gasoline is going to be air cavitation. And the offset of it is that most people actually gain fuel economy, especially on some of these mid 2000 trucks. And a lot of people don't take that into consideration, because when you have a truck that has a higher biodiesel content, it is going to have a higher water content to the tune of almost 6% water. And so when that happens, you have this diesel, especially when you're down to like a half a tank and it's sloshing around, you're going to get a bunch of air bubbles. And so when that's going through your fuel system on a stock fuel system, it's not taking the air out of it. So it's like when you have a hose that's been off for a while, then you turn it on, it sits there and it spits and sputters. That's what your injectors are doing inside the combustion chamber on your piston. So it doesn't have a good clean spray pattern. And we can see that, especially when we're in there doing motors or head gasket jobs. I personally always go out and I will look at the piston tops. We'll take a emery cloth to them and we'll take a look. I want to see the spray pattern of the injectors. I want to see, where it's at on the piston. Making sure you have good, clean diesel getting up into your engine bay and into your pistons is really important. And I feel like it is severely overlooked. But when you do these lift pumps, you get better fuel economy. It's not designed for that, but you do get it. You do pick up more smoother power, and it actually quiets down the valve train quite a bit. Your injector rattle goes down significantly.
There's so much good info in this podcast. I could probably keep you on here for another couple hours asking a bunch of questions that people ask me. I'm sure I didn't ask one, or I missed something, or somebody might have a specific question for you guys. What is the best way to reach out and connect with Siskiyou Diesel? Ask you questions, maybe get their truck in there, or maybe they are part of that 20% that's into performance. What's the best way to connect with them?
It would be getting a hold of us through our office here. It's our office phone number is 541-630-5020. That goes to our main office. Talk to me directly. It is my desk phone is 541-326-4846, or you can get a hold of us on Instagram. I hate social media. I do, contrary for what you've seen. I don't like it. I do not have a Facebook. If you message our Facebook account, that is metered by a moderator that tries to shoot the info over to me so I can, connect with those people directly. But I obviously am on the Instagram page that we do have for the shop. If you're in the area, come by, stop in. Usually you'll find me wandering around here somewhere, or my counter guy that helps me out, Walter. Or if you're lucky, you might be able to bump into Matt directly. But he is a very, very busy man. And I try to streamline his calls and questions and try to take care of as much of those as I can before I have to bug him.
Well, it was very awesome to chat with you, Kat. I appreciate all the expertise, the insights. There's so much good info in this conversation that we had. So definitely look forward to seeing more of the videos you guys release, more of the information. And keep me updated if you guys are seeing patterns with some of the newer trucks that either going to be coming out here pretty soon, or maybe you see something else pop up. But it was really cool to chat with you today.
Yeah, thank you. I do appreciate it.
Don't forget, Diesel fans, make sure and head on over to kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code 2024 Diesel40 for 40% off MSRP. It's a great way to save some money, get some really cool gear for EDC, hunting, fishing, around the job site, around the house. They've got a ton of different knives to choose from. You can pick from different opening mechanisms, blade steel, blade shape, handle design, and they have a whole lineup of knives designed to meet any budget. So use code 2024 Diesel40, get 40% off MSRP. Also, Target Sports USA. It's a great company. I've been a customer of theirs from way before the podcast even started. So if you're into hunting, the outdoors, hitting the range, things like that, they've got a ton of inventory, ton of different brands, different options. And if you go to targetsportsusa.com/dieselpc, there's a special offer for you guys. So on your first order, you'll get a free cleaning kit, which is really cool to be able to get. Plus, they have a membership, which is really awesome. So when you join up, you get free shipping on any order. So whether you're ordering one box, 20, 50, 100, whatever it might be, you get free shipping plus an instant 8% discount. There's also different times during the year where that discount can get deeper. So that's just something that you automatically get. Now, some other benefits to that membership is when you sign up, you automatically get entered into a giveaway. There's two giveaways. The first is for hunting. So there's a hunting trip, all expense paid in Colorado. They take care of everything that you would need. It's a great experience, great way to be able to get out there. Maybe it's a hunt of a lifetime. I've always wanted to do it. So you're automatically entered for that. Plus, they do a truck giveaway. So every year they give away a Ford F-150. And I think the last person who won was a member for 7 months. Got the call, won the truck. So those are some added benefits of being able to join up. We appreciate their support in helping make the Diesel podcast popular. Plus all of your support out there. You guys who subscribe on YouTube, podcast apps, follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We appreciate all that support and look forward to bringing you guys more of the content that you want to hear in 2024. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.